Hi guys, welcome back with another video. In today's drama, what began as an obligation turns into a forbidden love, but a dark secret threatens to destroy it all.
Yu Chen is a famous underground boxer who was once involved in a boxing championship, but was banned after he was caught taking banned substances. On this particular day, as he wrestles with an opponent, a very beautiful woman walks into the underground venue and observes him fighting. Afterwards, she's taken to a private room by a manager. Meanwhile, Yu Chen easily wins the boxing match, so his manager directs him to meet the woman, claiming she's his sponsor. He enters the private room to meet her, but is shocked to recognize her as the woman he had a one-night stand with 6 years ago. He becomes angry and confronts her for leaving him after the wild night together, but instead of providing an explanation, she suddenly flips out a bank card and offers him 10 million to enter into a contract marriage with her for 3 months. Feeling insulted at the sudden proposal, he rejects it and warns her to stay away from him. But she doesn't give up. The next day, she tracks him down to his house and presents the offer again. As he's about to turn her down, her twin children run out of the car to interrupt them. Upon seeing the kids, she begs him to accept the proposal to become their stepfather, but he angrily carries her to the car, rejects her offer again, and firmly shuts the door. As the twins go to check up on her, she sees a piece of paper in their hands and realizes that Yu Chen is actually in search of a wife. So she picks up a microphone and announces to the entire community that she's in love with Yu Chen and wants to marry him. The people are shocked at her confidence, and as they question her, a woman named Wenli walks out of the crowd and challenges her, claiming that she also wants to marry Yu Chen. The people show their support for her and persuade Yu Chen to choose her over Buyan. Seeing the commotion, Yu Chen turns to Buyan and yells at her to take her fatherless children away from him. She gets angry at his insulting words, so she slaps him and drives away with her kids in anger. On the way, she remembers that her doctor had advised her to find a bone marrow donor for her son, who had leukemia, and the only way to get it was to get pregnant in order to retrieve cord blood from her umbilical cord, which would be used to treat her son. As she thinks of a solution, her son gets an attack, so she drives him to the hospital for treatment. Later that day, as she looks after her sick son, her best friend visits her and advises her to confess to Yu Chen that the kids belong to him, but she refuses the advice and insists that she only needs him in order to get the bone marrow. As the 2 hours elapse, Yu Chen finds her in the hospital and drags her to his house. There, he forces her to sign a marriage license. She initially refuses and proposes a fake marriage, but he insists on getting a real marriage certificate, so she signs the papers and hands over her ID card as insurance. Later that day, they take an official photograph to consummate their marriage. The next day, she buys a new house in his neighborhood and moves in with her kids. That night, as he moves into the house, he sees her playing with the kids and finds them endearing. So he begins to wonder if they were born with his one-night stand with her. But he immediately waves away the thoughts. That night, as she prepares to sleep, she checks an app to confirm she's on her fertility period. So, as soon as he steps into the room, she tries to force herself on him in order to get pregnant. She holds onto him tightly and forces a kiss on him, causing him to have a flashback to their one-night stand 6 years ago. He indulges the kiss for a while, but comes back to his senses and pulls her away with all his strength before walking away to stay with his mother at the hospital. The next day, her best friend comes to visit, so she tells her about his refusal to sleep with her. Hearing this, the friend advises her to drug his drink and sleep with him. Following this advice, she waits for him to return home and tries to trick him into drinking a drugged cup of water, but he sees through her plan and grabs a drink from the refrigerator instead. At that moment, her daughter comes over and requests water, so she drinks the drugged water and pours another cup for her daughter. Later in the night, the drug begins to act up in her system, and she tries to seduce him again, but he takes her out for some fresh air. While outside, she falls into a drum of water and almost drowns, but he pulls her out on time and carries her inside. But the next day, he discovers she had fallen sick, so he decides to take her kids to school. On the way, he learns from the kids that her parents had disowned her due to her pregnancy. Hearing this, he promises to take care of the kids. As he walks them to school, a group of thugs sees him and immediately calls their boss, Mr. Hay. Meanwhile, Bayan recovers from her brief illness and receives a sudden call from some kidnappers who tell her that her kids have been kidnapped. They request a $1 million ransom, so she becomes scared and immediately tries to contact Yu Chen, but he's at the hospital. Wenli, the jealous girl, sees the call and ends it. She tries to contact him again, but Wenli turns off his phone. Left with no choice, Bayan drives alone to meet the kidnappers. After a while, Yu Chen notices his phone and turns it on. Immediately, his friend calls to inform him about the situation, so he goes to save her. As Bayan walks to the kidnapper's den, she calls her friend for backup, so the friend storms out with a man named Tang Ze. At the kidnapper's den, the gang boss reveals she had been deceived and that her kids were not kidnapped. They instruct her to hand over the ransom money, but she refuses, causing them to hold her captive. Suddenly, Yu Chen bursts in and requests her freedom, but the boss agrees on the condition that Yu Chen wins an impromptu boxing match. At the start of the fight, Yu Chen gains an edge over his opponent, but the situation suddenly changes as the opponent begins to cheat. Bayan notices this and calls out the cheating, but the boss ignores her and allows the fight to continue. Seeing this, she slaps the boss and turns to Yu Chen to cheer and encourage him. Her words give him strength, so he quickly flips the opponent and overpowers him in the fight. As soon as the boss sees this, he tries to hold Bayan hostage, but Yu Chen breaks out of the boxing ring and grabs her to escape. The gang chases after them, so Yu Chen tells her to escape while he stalls the gang. So, she escapes and calls for help. Tang Zi arrives with help and escorts her home with the kids. At home, she sees Yu Chen with Wenli and spots a kiss mark on his shoulders, belonging to Wenli. However, she ignores it and sends Wenli out. Meanwhile, Yu Chen is jealous of the sudden appearance of Tang Ze, so he takes the kids away from him and rudely tells the man to leave. The man refuses and insists on taking care of Bayan's children. This almost leads to an argument, but Bayan steps in on time and tells Tang Zi to leave. He insists on staying and criticizes her for marrying a broke man like Yu Chen. The atmosphere becomes tense due to his words, but the daughter suddenly reaches out to Yu Chen and asks him for a hug. So he carries the two kids and enters the house. As soon as he leaves, Bayan advises her ex to return home and stop interfering in her life. Inside the house, as she treats Yu Chen's wounds, he criticizes her again for linking up with her ex, but she denies the accusation and immediately clarifies that he had come to help her with the kidnappers. As soon as they clear the misunderstanding, he suddenly asks if her ex is the father of the kids. But she remains silent, refusing to answer the difficult question. Later that night, she helps him take a bath to avoid wetting his wounds. However, she notices a stab wound on his chest and inquires about it, causing him to have a flashback to the day he had been ambushed by some gang members. That night, Boyan reminds him of the terms of their contract marriage and persuades him to sleep with her, so he reluctantly agrees and begins to undress her. As they're about to make out with each other, the kids suddenly interrupt, so she decides to sleep with them for the night. The next day, while having breakfast with Yu Chen, she suddenly receives a call from her friend who informs her that her son had collapsed in school. She rushes out to the hospital and discovers that her ex, Tang Zhe, is the doctor attending to her son. When he sees the test result, he immediately realizes that she had married Yu Chen in order to get bone marrow for her son. He gives her a hug to comfort her, but at this moment, Yu Chen rushes to the hospital and stumbles into them, hugging each other. So he misinterprets the situation and assumes that Tang Zhe is the father of her kids. After the hug, Tang Zhe leaves to continue his shift. Now alone, Boyan notices Yu Chen hiding in a corner, so she rushes over to him to prevent him from finding out about her son's leukemia. Seeing her hurried reaction, he mistakes it as her feeling guilty, so he yells at her for reconnecting with her ex. In anger, he drags her home and tries to force himself on her, but she refuses and struggles with him. Amidst the struggle, he begs her to stay away from the father of her kids and promises to become a good father to her kids. He continues to force himself on her, so she breaks down in tears. Upon seeing her in tears, he stops his action and lets her off. Meanwhile, Boyan's father and brother argue over her. The brother, Jingyang, insists that the father disown her since she had given birth out of wedlock and brought disgrace to their family. But the father rejects the idea and advises him to focus on their boxing company. That night, as Jingyang investigates his sister, he discovers she has gotten married to Yu Chen. He also remembers that he had once implicated Yu Chen and got him banned from participating in boxing championships. After remembering this, he makes up a plan to deal with his sister. That night, he meets up with Yu Chen and tells him to participate in an underground boxing competition. But Yu Chen rejects the proposal since he knows that the man was the person who made him lose his professional boxing license. Seeing his refusal, the man gives a photo and threatens to go after his wife if he refuses to participate in the competition. To save Boyan, he calls her over to his house and begs her to end the marriage contract with him. But she's shocked at his request and firmly refuses. He continues to insist, and at that moment, his sick mother returns from the hospital and sees their marriage photograph on the wall. Upon learning that her son has gotten married, she begs him to throw a huge wedding party to celebrate. Hearing this, Boyan agrees. The next day, they host a huge wedding with all the villagers in attendance. During the wedding, Yu Chen's mother gives her a family relic that had been passed down through generations. That night, they sleep with each other to consummate their marriage. A few days later, as Boyan returns from work, a thug sent by her brother tries to kidnap her, but she uses a seizure device on him. Yu Chen arrives in time to see this and immediately goes to confront Jingyang, unaware that the man is her brother. He kidnaps Jingyang, intending to drive him into the sea and drown him. But Jingyang begins to panic, so to save himself, he confesses that he's Boyan's brother. which automatically makes him Yu Chen's brother-in-law. Yu Chen is shocked to learn that Buyan is the sister of the man who ruined his career. In confusion, he steps out of the car to process the information, but the man's thugs use the opportunity to hit him on the head. He manages to fight them off and returns home to meet Buyan, who is waiting for him. In a state of confusion, he bites her neck and then pulls out his card to return all the money she had given him for the contract marriage. He begs her to leave, so the next day, she moves out of the house with her children. Yu Chen becomes broke, so to earn money for his sick mother, he decides to participate in an underground boxing match with a dangerous opponent. The match goes viral, and Bayan's friend learns of it and immediately informs her. As she runs over to stop Yu Chen from fighting to death, Tang Zhe suddenly calls to inform her that she is pregnant with Yu Chen's child. Upon learning this, she increases her pace and runs to the underground boxing ring. But she arrives at the moment when Yu Chen is beaten unconscious. That night, she carefully tends to his wounds and stays with him until he falls asleep. The next morning, as soon as he wakes up, he runs to find her and begs her to stay by his side forever. In the night, he tries to sleep with her again, but she stops him and reveals the pregnancy news to him, making him very happy. The next day, Tang Zhe calls and tries to persuade her to leave Yu Chen since she's pregnant and now has the cord for her son's leukemia. But she rejects the advice and insists on staying with Yu Chen. Tang Zhe becomes angry at her decision and throws away her pregnancy test results in anger. Coincidentally, Wenli picks up the test results and discovers that Buyan is not pregnant. It turns out that Tang Zhe had lied to make Buyan break the contract marriage. Meanwhile, Jingyang receives a scolding from his father for trying to ruin his sister's marriage, so she becomes angry and informs his underlings to release fake news about Buyan to the press. So, the next day, as Buyan enjoys a romantic time with Yu Chen, reporters suddenly storm into her house, accusing her of being the mastermind behind the drug scandal that disqualified Yu Chen from the championship competition. Upon hearing the accusation, he stands up to them and debunks the news, making her fall deeper in love with him. Meanwhile, Wenli meets with Yu Chen's mother and reveals that the pregnancy is fake and that Buyan is the daughter of the richest man in the country. Upon hearing this, the mother develops a heart attack, so Wenli searches the house for her drugs. Coincidentally, she finds the contract marriage documents and immediately takes a picture to post on the internet. As Buyan and Yu Chen return home, the mother bombards him with questions about the fake pregnancy and the girl's rich background. So Buyan steps forward to clarify that she's in love with Yu Chen and wants the best for him. As they argue over this, the mother gets notified about the news of their contract marriage, so she yells at her to leave. Seeing the situation, she decides to leave, but at this moment, the mother falls unconscious. So Yu Chen stays behind to take care of his mother. Meanwhile, Buyan begins to research evidence to prove that Yu Chen was not involved in drugs. She meets up with his old coach and offers him money to reveal the truth. It turns out that the coach had been employed by her brother to fabricate the drug test that led Yu Chen to get banned from boxing 6 years ago. After the truth is released about Jingyang's involvement in the drug scandals, reporters bombard him with questions, but he ignores them and drives home. As soon as he gets home, his father sternly criticizes him for always getting into the news for the wrong reasons. The man reminds him that 6 years ago, he had drugged his sister, which made her get into a one-night stand with Yu Chen. Jingyang tries to excuse his action, but his father slaps him and instructs him to step down as the president of the company. Meanwhile, Yu Chen enjoys a rare happy moment with Buyan's kids. When her friend sees his close bond with the kids, she persuades Buyan to confess to him that the children are his own. But Buyan insists on revealing the truth when everything is settled with his mother. Unknown to them, the mother is at home watching the news when she sees Buyan's father apologizing for his son's behavior. This causes her to have flashbacks to her younger days. It turns out that her husband used to be close friends with him and often lent him money for his business. But one day, her husband left for work, and his dead body was returned to her without an explanation. So she believes that Buyan's father was responsible for her husband's death. As she cries about this, Yu Chen returns home with Buyan to settle things with her. But upon seeing Buyan, she develops a heart attack and falls unconscious. At the hospital, the doctor reveals that the mother is in critical condition, and the only doctor who can handle her surgery has retired. Yu Chen is devastated by this news, but Tangzi suddenly shows up and pulls Buyan for a private conversation. He tells her that the doctor is a close friend of her father, so if she asks her father for help, he can lend a helping hand. As he reveals this to her, unknown to them, Wenli is eavesdropping on their conversation. That night, Buyan runs to her father's house under the rain to seek his help. Unknown to her, Tang Zhe is already in a meeting with her father. It turns out that Tang Zhe had lied about her father knowing the doctor. He offers to introduce the doctor to her father in exchange for her hand in marriage. After a while, Buyan storms into her father's study room and requests his help in finding a doctor who can save Yu Chen's mother's life. But the father agrees on the condition that she surrenders her shares to him and replaces her brother as the president of the company. She agrees without a second thought, causing her father to throw her out in anger. But she doesn't give up. She continues to kneel under the rain until midnight, before collapsing. However, Tang Zhe shows up on time and holds on to her before she collapses on the floor. Meanwhile, her father agrees to send the doctor to help her out. So, as soon as the doctor arrives, Wenli lies to Yu Chen, claiming she had found and convinced the doctor to perform the surgery. After a few hours, the doctor returns and announces that the surgery was a success. Upon hearing this, Yu Chen runs over to take care of Buyan after he learns she has fallen sick. After staying with her for a while, he goes to take care of his recovering mother. There he meets Wenli, who continues to claim she was behind the doctor's return. The mother hears this and persuades her son to leave Buyan and marry Wenli, but he firmly refuses. Meanwhile, Buyan's father visits her and urges her to sign the documents to become the president of his company. So, that day, as she reports to the company to take over, she sees Wenli, a worker in the company. Wenli is shocked to see her and quickly calls the guards to throw her out, but Buyan retaliates by calling the general manager. When the man arrives, he ignores Wenli and pays his full respects to Buyan. He also announces to the entire employee that she's the new president of the company, so they bow down to her in respect. As she turns to leave, everyone suddenly gets a news notification announcing her engagement to Tang Zhe. They begin to congratulate her, but she's confused and rushes to meet her father, who tells her that one of the conditions to save Yu Chen's mother is for her to marry Tangzi. She remains stubborn and refuses, so the father threatens to deal with Yu Chen and his mother, which forces her to contemplate his proposal. That evening, as she leaves the company, reporters swarm around her asking about the engagement. At the same time, Yu Chen arrives to see her. As soon as she sees him, she begins to rethink her father's decision and suddenly tells the press that her engagement to Tangzi is real. Yu Chen is shocked to hear this and runs after her for an explanation, but she ignores him and leaves. So, he goes to question her father, who tells him that Buyan had knelt down in the rain to save his mother. He also reveals that Yu Chen was the reason she was disowned by her family 6 years ago. This makes him confused, and he tries to inquire more, but Buyan's father drives away. As he leaves dejectedly, Wenli runs up to him and tries to convince him to leave Buyan for good, but he warns her to stay away from him and also exposes her lie about finding the doctor who treated his mother. But Wenli doesn't give up on his rejection. That day, as she accompanies his mother in doing the laundry, she stumbles on an old picture of his father standing together with a man. The mother tells her that Yu Chen's father used to be close friends with Buyan's father in the earlier days. But after her husband died, she suspects that his death had something to do with Buyan's father. She tells Wenli to hide the picture and not show it to Yu Chen. Hearing this, Wenli slips the photograph between some clothes. That day, as Yu Chen returns home and pleads with his mother to stay with him, Wenli walks in and purposely drops the photo on the floor for him to see. He begins to question his mother about the photos and discovers that Buyan's father must have been involved in his father's death. He immediately goes to confront the man, who's shocked to realize that Yu Chen is his best friend's son. Before believing the photos, Buyan's father instructs his guards to investigate Yu Chen's background. But in the meantime, he tells Yu Chen to stay as a guest at the house until the truth about his background is uncovered. After discovering that Yu Chen's father was his best friend who helped him build the company, he begins to feel guilty and tries to transfer some of the company's shares to him as compensation. But as he's about to sign the document, Tangzi overhears him telling a subordinate that he'll cut off the engagement with the Tang family in order to make his daughter marry Yu Chen. Hearing this, Tangzi's expression changes, and he begins to cook up a plan. As the family's doctor, he meets up with Buyan's father and convinces him to take his medication. However, he sprinkles some poison in the glass of water for the man to take. Then, he goes out without suspicion. Coincidentally, Yu Chen walks into the office to continue his conversation with Buyan's father, who's developing small signs of a heart attack. The man suppresses the pain and confesses that he was close friends with Yu Chen's father in their younger days. Yu Chen flares up at his confession and holds him by the neck. But at this moment, the man develops a full-blown heart attack. He manages to give Yu Chen the shared document, but Buyan walks into the office and sees him holding her father by the neck, causing her to misinterpret the situation. The father becomes unconscious due to the attack, and at this moment, Tangzi returns to administer CPR on him. At the hospital, Tangzi announces that the father will remain in a coma for a long time. But Yu Chen begins to suspect that he has something to do with the sudden heart attack. That night, he storms into the Buyan family's mansion and takes over it. Buyan's father is transferred to the mansion to recuperate. That night, as Yu Chen checks up on him, He mistakenly finds a listening device in the man's room and suspects that Tang Zi is behind it, but he acts ignorant. After a few days, Boyan visits her father to check on his health. As she talks to him, he shows signs of recovering, so she gets happy. Unknown to her, Tang Zi was eavesdropping on her through the listening device. When he realizes that her father will recover soon, he makes up his mind to silence the man, so that the man won't break up his engagement with Boyan. That night, he sneaks into the mansion and turns off the electricity to cause a blackout. In the darkness, he sneaks up to the father's room to inject him with poison. Meanwhile, Yu Chen tells Boyan about the listening device he had found. He also gives her a headphone to eavesdrop on Tang Zi. While eavesdropping, she discovers that he intends to kill her father in order to get married to her. She immediately rushes into the room to save her father. She slaps Tang Zi and tells him to get out of her life forever. When he leaves, she receives a call from the hospital telling her they have found a suitable bone marrow for her son. She announces the good news to Yu Chen, but he reveals he had discovered her son's illness and donated the marrow. A few weeks later, Bu Jingyang suddenly calls Wenli and offers her an opportunity to take revenge on his sister. Hearing this, she decides to collide with him to kidnap Boyan. So, one day at the hospital, when her son goes missing, Wenli comes out of nowhere and points her in the wrong direction, leading to the kidnapping of her and her son. Bu Jingyang holds her captive and calls Yu Chen to come save her. Yu Chen immediately drives over, but discovers that she's held hostage in a car. To save her, he hands over the company shares to Bu Jingyang in exchange for her freedom. But the man suddenly sets fire to the car and runs away. Yu Chen tries to save Boyan from the car, but discovers it's locked. Tang Zi suddenly shows up and also tries to rescue her, but to no avail. Seeing this, Yu Chen immediately tries to break the car's window while Tang Zi runs to grab a stone. But it's too late. The car ends up exploding, but fortunately, Yu Chen is able to rescue her from the fire. Since she's unconscious, he rushes her to the hospital for surgery. Wenli visits him to confess her involvement in the kidnapping, so he tells her to leave and never appear in front of him again. At this moment, Boyan's operation ends, so she's wheeled out by the nurses. Seeing Boyan's state, Wenli begins to feel guilty, so she calls the cops and hands herself over to them. Meanwhile, Boyan recovers and reunites with Yu Chen. 2 months later, her father and son also recovers from their illness. The father goes to visit Yu Chen's mother and confesses that her husband was his best friend. An incident occurred, so the friend jumped in to save his life, resulting in his death. He had tried to search for Yu Chen and his mother to compensate them, but they had relocated, so he was unable to repay his friend. He begs for her forgiveness, so she decides to forgive him due to her twin grandchildren. A few weeks later, Yu Chen accepts a boxing match with a ruthless opponent. He ends up winning after a brutal fight, so he's awarded. There, he proposes to her and asks her to marry him again after their contract marriage ends. She accepts his proposal and kisses them in the ring. The twin children also run into the ring to celebrate his victory. At the end of their fake marriage contract, Yu Chen and Boyan host another wedding on a boat with all the villagers in attendance. Tang Zi watches it from afar and walks away in regret. As the couple celebrates their union, Boyan uses the opportunity to announce her pregnancy to Yu Chen. He's shocked and happy at the same time, so he lovingly kisses her.